Good afternoon and welcome to the New England Council on Crime and Delinquency webinar. I'm Amy Jacobs, the president of NECCD. It's my pleasure to welcome you here today. We would like to thank our sponsors, Attenti and AverHealth, for helping us make today's webinar available to you free of charge. Attenti's Strategic Marketing Manager, Carrie Ryan, and AverHealth's Director of Marketing and Partner Relations, Jackie Sheehy, have been advocates of NECCD for many years, and we truly appreciate their support that they bring to us. Stress less than recharge, beating burnout before it brutally beats you. Today, Dr. Davis will teach us how to energize our lives and career from the inside out. Thriving begins with cultivating an attitude of gratitude and developing positive stress response styles. To get us started, please know that this webinar is being recorded. Please use the Q&A box on your menu to ask questions. We will do our best to answer your questions throughout the presentation, and we'll take some time at the end for additional Q&A. You're also welcome to utilize the chat window for discussion. For your information, attendance certificates and a brief survey will be sent to your email after this presentation. For any licensed social workers who want CEUs, please put your name and CEU in the chat window now so that we can take attendance. For those individuals, a separate email will be sent out. Just to clarify, everyone will receive an attendance certificate and licensed social workers will receive CEU verification in a separate email. At the end of today's webinar, there will be a brief 15-minute break. NECCD will be hosting our annual award ceremony. You're all welcome to stay and watch, or feel free to log off at the end of the webinar. Now it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Jermaine Davis. Before receiving the College Instructor of the Year Award, Dr. Davis worked in corporate America. Now he's an award-winning professor in communications and leadership studies. Dr. Davis has authored 10 books. He holds a BA and MA in speech communications and a doctorate in organizational leadership. Dr. Davis is an international keynote speaker. Organizations like 3M, Best Buy, and West Point Military Academy regularly seek out Dr. Davis's expertise in areas of teamwork, leadership, and communication. Thank you for joining us today, Dr. Davis. I'll hand things over to you and we can join you for Q&A and wrap things up at the end of your presentation.
Thank you. And I want to give a shout out to Jackie and Paula. Jackie introduced me to Paula, and years ago we were working on an opportunity for me to come in person, and that didn't happen. Then COVID happened, so I am here now. But I wanted to honor those individuals who created space for me to be here today. So let me start off by telling you a story. About 10 years ago, I was leaving Boise, Idaho. And as I'm on the flight, everyone, the flight attendant comes to the middle of the plane and they hold up two things. They hold up a card like this and they hold up an oxygen mask. And so the flight attendant says something like this: in case of an emergency, please secure your own oxygen mask before assisting others. Now, here's the interesting thing. I've heard this sentiment, this message hundreds of times because I fly often. But that particular day, everyone, I had an aha moment. And you know what an aha moment is? It's that moment when you start to think deeply about something perhaps you've heard over and over again. But for whatever reasons, this particular day and in that particular moment, it resonated. So I'm going to share that with you again. In case of an emergency, please secure your own oxygen mask before assisting others. As we talk about stressing less and we talk about recharging, I want you to really think about this. If you're going to beat burnout before it brutally beats you, I want you to think about how are you putting on your own oxygen mask. I grew up on the west side of Chicago, inner city. And before my mother passed away, she used to always say this. She would say, you can't give what you ain't got. And you know, think about that. I am a better father, a better friend, a better speaker, a better professor. I'm a better human being when I take care of myself. So I want you to begin to think about, as we go into this first slide here, I want you to think about this: centering yourself and practicing self-care. So there's a lot of data, a lot of research on self-care, everyone, but I want you to really think about this. And I want you to think about the 3 Ps of your life: your private life, your personal life, and your professional life. So the information that I'm going to share with you over the next hour or so, you will be able to use this first in your private life. So if you have a partner, spouse, or significant other, you'll be able to share this with them. As a matter of fact, here's what I want to encourage. If you hear anything today and you have a light bulb moment, you have an aha moment, I want to encourage you to utilize that to help build that type of culture and climate, even in your own household. I have an 11-year-old son by the name of Zion, like Mount Zion. And when he gets stressed, everyone, you know what he says? He says, "Dad, I need to get back to my baseline." Now, I taught my son this concept when he was 4 years old. And it's really important. So when we think about self-care, I want you to think about, what's your process? And truly, if you're going to beat burnout, if you're going to stress less, you have to get back to your baseline. So you can use it in your private life with your partner, spouse, or significant other, and then also in your personal life with your family members and your platonic friends. And then the 3rd P, your professional life, the work that you do in your community, in your organization. So those are the 3 Ps where you can utilize this information: private life, personal life, and professional life. So at 4, I begin to think, what if I share this with my 4-year-old? And he learned, everyone, coping mechanisms. If you're taking notes, I would encourage you to put this in your notes. Beating burnout, stressing less, requires that we develop coping mechanisms. And everyone, not just any kind of coping mechanisms, we want to develop what I call a healthy and positive SRS. SRS stands for stress response style. So I want to set the tone there, that if you're going to stress less, if you're going to recharge and you got to beat burnout, you want to develop a healthy and positive stress response style. Let me tell you another story. So I grew up inner city Chicago, and I started my speaking career, everyone. I didn't choose it. I say it chose me. So I grew up in this healthy family from my perspective, right? And what I mean by that is, I had my mother, my grandmother, my uncles, and you know what? In life, sometimes relationships don't work out, which means it didn't work out between my mother and my father. So they went their separate ways. But I still had individuals who supported me and loved me. When I was around 5 or 6, my grandfather was tragically murdered on the south side of Chicago. Patriarch of our family. And when my grandfather was murdered, here is an observation that I had at that age of 5 and 6. The uncles that used to take me to go play Pac-Man, Miss Pac-Man, Space Invaders, right? Asteroid, Centipede, Millipede, these video games that were popular when I was growing up, they didn't do that anymore. And you know what I noticed? They were coping with their stressful situations through alcohol, crack, cocaine, and heroin. So I saw that in my family growing up. And so I didn't understand it at that time, but I understand it now. You know what they were doing? They were self-medicating. Now, again, if we're going to stress less, if we're going to recharge, if we're going to beat burnout, we have to develop healthy and positive coping mechanisms. So we want an SRS, a stress response style that works in our favor. And so after that, some of my family members, everyone, they develop addictions, drugs, alcohol. And with those addictions, I started to see my uncles, and one of my aunts go into county jail, and some went to prison. Why am I sharing this with you? Because they were experiencing a stressful situation and they made some choices. And in the process of making choices, they didn't have healthy and positive stress response style. So I'm very passionate about this topic because I see how it holistically affects family. And now being a college professor, and I have, students at all different levels, all races, all orientations, different ethnicities, different cultures. Here's one of the things I want to encourage you, and please pass this on to the people in your lives and the people that you serve, is this. We know self-care matters, but you know what happens? People neglect their self-care. Remember, in case of an emergency, please secure your own oxygen mask. As my mother said, baby, you can't give what you ain't got. So here's what I mean. This is the process of getting back to your baseline. And here's what I mean by your baseline. Everyone, we all have a baseline. Your baseline is who you are at your most relaxed state. Think about this. Last week, as a matter of fact, a week ago today, I went to the dentist. And as I sat in the chair, the dentist says, Mr. Davis, let me check your blood pressure. And so she checked my blood pressure and it was a little high. And so everyone, I'm a teacher, I'm a speaker, I'm a facilitator. So I'm always looking for a rich story. So I said, question, is it high that you're concerned? She says, no. I said, well, what do you do if you have a patient and their blood level is really high? She looked at me and she says, you know what we do? If it's really high, we can't move forward. Now, everyone, again, the teacher in me says, tell me more. And she says, we may need to get them to an emergency room. I said, so it's important for people to get to their baseline. Oh, absolutely, Mr. Davis, right? Your baseline matters. So everyone, here's what I'm sharing with you. You want to beat burnout? You want to stress less? Begin to think about, how do I get back centered? When the world around me is spinning and I feel drained, I feel depleted, I feel overwhelmed. So I'm gonna share some practices with you for you to get back to your baseline. Because here's the thing, there's always gonna be chaos. There's always gonna be conflict. There's gonna be change and there's gonna be stress. So the goal is to develop a healthy SRS, stress response style, and figure out how to get to your baseline. And here's what happens. Now, your body will actually let you know when you're moving away from your baseline. And so there's a term, there's a biological term, it's called proprioceptive stimuli. Proprioceptive stimuli. And what that is the physiological changes and sensations that goes on when you are about to leave your baseline. So I'm going to give you some examples, and then I am going to invite you, if you feel comfortable, to share in the chat how your body responds. So everyone, think about this. When I feel stressed and overwhelmed, now I've learned this. One of the things I do, I told you I was at the dentist, right? I grind my teeth. So my dentist told me, Mr. Davis, you grind your teeth. And I said, I notice when I'm really stressed, I grind my teeth. Thank you, Bianca, right? Bianca says, headache, fatigue. Thank you so much. So what do? So everyone, what is your proprioceptive stimuli? Angie says, body aches. Thank you, Angie. Kayla says, Bell's palsy twice. Thank you for being authentic. This is a good group. I was hoping you were going to show up and want to have a little professional fun. So everyone, here's the thing. Elisa says, I eat chocolate. Hey, save me some. Latasha says, don't sleep. Cecil says, stomach aches, pains. Okay, this is Greek, deep side. So everyone, here's the key. You have to be aware of your proprioceptive stimuli. So I'm gonna give you an example. Here's what your body says. You're not loving me. You're not showing me love. You're not getting enough sleep. You're becoming an emotional eater. You're hollering at the dog and the cat, and they're just being dogs and cats. You're losing your patience. You're easily irritated. You're easily agitated. So here's one of the things I want you to start thinking about. What are those signs? And they're there, everyone, but here's the thing. You got to be more intentional about noticing. So here's another thing. When I grind my teeth, when I bite my lip, and everyone, here's what my 11-year-old, well, he taught me this. My son Zion taught me this when I was 6. He says, Dad, when you're upset and angry, I said, Zion, what do I do? He says, Dad, you do this. He said, you shake your head. He says, your face looks really stern and you start rubbing your chest. Now, everyone, I never knew I did that. So in communication, we call those blind spots. But what's happening is the stimuli that's affecting you mentally, emotionally, and or physically is causing you to move away from your what? Your baseline. So let's talk about, hey, Jermaine, how do I get back to my baseline? So let me give you some practical tips. Right here, practice the 4 R's. Recharge, refresh, renew, replenish. Recharge, refresh, renew, replenish. Now, here's the key. If you're going to develop a healthy and a positive SRS, stress response style, you have to be deliberate, intentional, and purposeful, everyone, about what do I need to do to get back to my baseline. So again, in the chat, I am going to invite you to share, what do you do to get back to your baseline? Everyone, I got to tell you, you know one of the things I do? I love stand-up comedy. Not performing it. I'm not a comedian, but I love going to listen to comedians. And here's what I found. Going to the comedy club doesn't eliminate my problems. You know what it does? It alleviates them. Let me say that again. Going to the comedy club does not eliminate. It alleviates. You know what alleviation is? That means when the problem grows and enlarges, this is when people get overwhelmed. Private life, again, say for instance, you got a partner, spouse, or significant other, and everyone, you're having conflict, right? Sometimes the people that we love the most intimately, guess what? We're having conflict. Well, guess what that does? It creates stress. And then, so I got to share this with you. Sweeping it under the rug, my friends, only contributes to an unhealthy and a negative stress response style. So let's go back to my family members. Of course, they had a traumatic experience, right? If I'm heard that my grandfather was murdered, I know my uncle, Ricky, Maurice, Michael, and Kenny, that's their dad, and they were close. But they self-medicated in a way that took them towards a downward spiral. So the goal is to develop, right? So you're having this conflict and this tension. Do not sweep it under the rug. Before we get off this call, I'm going to give you a practical tip. When you have conflict and tension, right? You're not seeing eye to eye. You intensify, they intensify. You escalate, they escalate. You're passionate, they're passionate. And guess what? No one is backing down. So here's what happens. Boom, 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 boom. You listen to me, you listen to me. And so sometimes people think sweeping it under the rug is going to help. So let me share this with you. What you resist only persists. Let me say that again. What you resist only persists. It doesn't go away. You know what it does? When you avoid it, I write about this in my second book, Leading with Greatness. If you avoid your conflict, if you deny the conflict, if you minimize the conflict, guess what it does? It gets bigger. And guess what that does? It creates more stress. And then you overwhelm, then you're drained and you're depleted. So one of the things we want to do is to not sweep things under the rug, but to deal with it. So I want to encourage you to think about what are those things you need to do. So it may not eliminate the problem, but it alleviates it. Well, what does alleviation do? It means that you get it in a situation where you can begin to manage it. Just think when things get overwhelmed, one of the reasons why people fold and they can't focus is they feel like it's too enormous. It's too gigantic. So we want to try to eliminate But if not, what can we alleviate? We can bring it down so we can begin to deal with it. So one of my favorite writers is Iyanla Van Zant. And Iyanla Van Zant says, don't conceal, deal so you can heal. I'll say it again. Don't conceal, deal. So deal with the issues. Why? So you can heal. So now I'm going to go to the chat, and thank you for participating. Thank you. Latasha says, I take a quick ride. You know, Latasha, I've heard quite a few people say that. And if I'm pronouncing this right, Antonella says, sleep, listen to music. I listen to music too. Yes, everyone, look at this. Watch funny Facebook videos. You know, my son sends me funny TikTok videos, and that's one of the things we do. We just last night, my son Zion and I, he's like, Dad, come here, let me show you this. And can I tell you, we laugh. Sometimes it's only for 3 minutes. But there's research that show that dopamine and those healthy emotions begin to emerge, and hormones begin to emerge to get you back to your baseline. So think about this. Now, before I move forward, here's the thing. You have to be deliberate, intentional, and purposeful. When I'm stressed out, I know, Jermaine, not in this order. Watch some stand-up comedy. If I can, I go to a comedy club. I have a group of people that I chat with, that I feel safe, where I can be vulnerable. I don't have to pretend to be Superman or Wonder Woman, right? I can actually just be real. I'm afraid. You know, I'm confused about this. You know what that does? When I emote, when I share, for me, it's therapeutic. Why? Because I used to stuff. And let me tell you, there's consequences to stuffing. So before I move from this slide, here's the thing. If you truly want to stress less, if you truly want to beat burnout, if you truly want to recharge, then you have to commit to doing those, 1 to 3 things that help you get centered, get back to your baseline. All right, moving forward. So we've been talking about stress. So I want to give you a working definition. Here's what I mean by stress. Stress are factors that you perceive. I want this to sink in. Factors. When I say factors, that's internal noise and external noise that you perceive as threatening to your well-being. In other words, here's what I mean by well-being: your overall happiness. So you see that these factors, whether it's going on internally or whether it's going on externally. So stress factors are those things that happen internally and externally. Now, everyone, I really want you to look at this definition. Perceive, that you perceive as threatening. So the mind could actually contribute to your stress level. Let me say this again. How you interpret things and how you perceive things can contribute to your stress level. For example, someone shared this the other day. Jermaine, there's a group of people that I went to college with, and once a week, we have this group chat. Sometimes twice a week, we check in. Well, I sent a private message to one of my friends, and they didn't respond. And then I sent another message, and they didn't respond. And I said, well, what happened? And then the person says, well, I started thinking. I said, you started thinking what? Was it positive thoughts or negative? Then the person started laughing, right? And everyone, now there's a small group of people that work with one another. And this person said, I went negative. I said, oh, so you told yourself a story and you bought into that story. And then you believed the story and you created a theatrical production with your story, right? And the person laughed and said, yeah, I started telling myself this story. So everyone, here's what I want to share with you. How we interpret things matters. So let me give you an example. About 10 years ago, I was invited to speak in this community. And in this community, there were a few large companies in a smaller community that employed, here was the actual statistics. These two companies employed 71% of the people in that community. Well, one of the places they moved. And so I'm speaking, so they held my presentation at this college. And so the community was invited to come. And so afterwards I did a book signing. So I'll never forget, there were two women who came up, and so I'm signing books. And so I said, so tell me about yourself. So I'm gonna make these names up. So the first woman says, oh, my name is Nancy. And I said, well, Nancy, you know, thanks for the support. I said, tell me a little bit about your story. Nancy was like, well, Jermaine, I'm excited about this new journey I'm about to start, but I'm really nervous, but I'm really excited. Now, everyone, she had mixed emotions, which is normal, right? So when you have been working somewhere, she worked there for 23 years. She started when she was 18. So she worked there for 20. So now she's in her 40s, right? And she's like, I'm nervous. I've been there for 23 years. And I said, tell me what you're nervous about. And she says, well, like you talked about in your presentation, the fear of the unknown. I don't know what to do. I did this for 23 years. I knew what to do every day, 5 days a week. And she says, but I'm about to go on this new journey. And I said, but it seems like you're a little excited. And everyone, here's what she said. I will never forget this. She says, you know what, Jermaine? I always wanted to become a nurse. But because in my community, you were encouraged, apply here. This is a really good job and you can make really good money. I said, well, did you? She says, yeah. She says, but I always felt internally unfulfilled. I said, why? She says, because I always wanted to be a nurse and not work in a factory. And she says, so I'm excited that with this buyout package, they're going to pay for us to get a 2-year degree. And we got a severance package. So she's like, I'm going to start this new journey. And then everyone, her friend was next to her. And I looked at her. Now, everyone, I'm a communications professor. So non-verbally, her friend was like this. She had her arms folded and she had a look on her face, everyone, like she was angry with the world. So then I proceeded, kind of like the yellow light, I proceeded with caution. And I said, so you're friends? And she was like, yep. And I said, well, my name is Jermaine. She says, I know that. And I was like, uh-oh, this is going to be a tough conversation, right? That's what I said in my head. And I said, so what's your story? And she says, well, it's not the same as hers. And I said, well, do you feel comfortable sharing? And she says, you know what? I'm peed off. Now, everyone, she didn't say peed off. You know what she said? She said, I'm peed off. And I said, why? She says, because that company promised me that they would never leave, and they're leaving because they got a bigger buyout, and I'm angry. Now, it's not wrong that she was angry. That's normal. But here's what I'm sharing with you about stress. One aspect of stress is how we interpret things, and it can contribute to our level of stress. So if you're taking notes, please put this in your notes. The word rumination. Rumination. Rumination is when people consistently dwell on negative stuff. Now, everyone, there's nothing wrong with acknowledging reality. Nothing wrong with that. Rumination is when we fall in love with negative stuff and we can't let it go and it dominates our mind. So you know what that does? It adds to our stress level and it starts to create cognitive strain, emotional strain, and physiological strain. I want you to sit with this for a minute. So one of the things I want to invite you to do is to be aware when you're ruminating. And I'm going to give you 3 tips. So the first thing is to notice when you're ruminating. Now, sometimes some people are really good at reflecting, so they know when they're ruminating. Sometimes we need trusted people to say, hey, like, okay, say for instance, your partner, spouse, or significant other, they might just say, whatever terms of endearment, honey, sweetie, pumpkin, sugar plum, I don't know what they call you, right? Hey, I know you got a lot on your plate, but you're kind of going down that spiral. I just want to let you know. So sometimes you might be like, You know what? Thank you for letting me know. Then sometimes people get defensive. They don't want to listen to the feedback, but really the feedback is part of what will help you. Remember this? Maybe we can't eliminate, but we can alleviate. And you might just say, oh, Jermaine talked about, I'm leaving my baseline. You know what? Thank you, honey. Thank you, sweetie. I appreciate that. You know, I get caught up in my emotions and I get swept away. Now, I use those two phrases, and there's a book written called Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman. Everyone, this is a phenomenal book. It's kind of a dense book, but I got to tell you, I read this book 20 years ago, and I was in my mid-20s when I read this book. And Daniel Goleman says that sometimes people he uses these two phrases. He says people get engulfed and swept away in their emotions. So then sometimes they don't see it. So I got to tell you, sometimes we need people to help us become more objective. So notice when you're ruminating. Then when you notice, here's the thing, you got to interrupt it. So I notice I'm going down a slippery slope. I'm telling myself this story. You know what? I'm fearful, right? All right. So I need to interrupt that, and then I replace it with something more constructive, something more positive. And so what, again, that doesn't eliminate, but it alleviates. Why? Because you want to be able to manage the stress. And here's the thing about stress. You will never get rid of stress until when? Until you die. So the goal is not to eliminate stress. The goal is to manage the stress. Become aware of the stress so you can deal with your stressors. So I'm going to check. Amy, do I have any questions or comments that anyone want me to address? I want to pause because I know I gave people a lot.
Actually, I think we're going at a pretty good pace. I'm not seeing any questions popping up.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So everyone, the goal is to manage your stress. And then here's the thing. So I talked about how you perceive it. So here's what the research calls it. The research calls it cognitive interpretation. That when you're faced with a situation, how do you cognitively make sense of it? And again, I'm not asking you not to acknowledge reality. And so sometimes reality is so tough that we need to cry. And that's all part of the process. But think about, am I ruminating? Okay, moving forward, everyone. What factors, here's a process question. What factors cause you to stress out most often in life, school, or work? If you'll be so kind in the chat, just think about that. What causes you to stress out most often? What have you noticed? What are those things that contribute to your stress level? Thank you. Money. Yes, feeling the lack of control. This is real stuff. Feeling like I don't have control. Workload, family, lack of time, bosses, elderly. Yes, aging parents. This is real stuff. Okay. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. I really appreciate that. So I'm going to share something, some things with you. But before we move forward, everyone, here's what I want you to do. If you're taking notes, put this in your notes. Control the controllables. Control the controllables. And I'm going to share something with you that I read in my early 20s. And this book, you know, Oprah talks about books that change your life. I got to tell you, there was a book that radically changed my life. And again, so much and so, when I knew that if I ever had kids, I was going to introduce them to this. And then I remember, then they had a kids version. And I bought this book way before I had a kid. And I was like, you know what? My kid or kids, I'm going to introduce them to this. And I'm going to tell you what that book is. The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Dr. Stephen R. Covey. Rest in peace to Dr. Stephen Covey. That book changed my life. Then they have the 7 Highly Effective Habits for Kids. And I used to read that to my son. And now I'll say, Z, what's the first habit Dr. Covey talks about? He says, Dad, be proactive. I said, okay, so we talk about these 7 habits, right? But if you're taking notes, here's something that helped me. So here's what Stephen Covey says. Draw a circle. So draw a big circle if you're willing to do this. And then draw a smaller circle in the bigger circle, right? So you got two circles. You got the big circle, and then you got a smaller circle inside of there. And so outside on the bigger circle, everyone, here's what he says. This is the circle of concern. And then the internal circle is what he calls the circle of influence. And so where or what will you give your time to? Your circle of concerns and circle of influence. So here's what Covey says. It's not that you don't think about the circle of concern, but influence what you can influence. So that's what I call control the controllables, right? And so when we feel in the lack of control, one of the ways for us to increase the level of certainty is to begin to control what I can control. And it's not that you ignore the circle of concern, but remember, cognitive interpretation, right? So everyone, let me give you an example. So, Jackie knows my story, and I think Paula knows part of my story. So I started speaking, right? So I share with you, but I started speaking when not when my grandfather was murdered, because I was only 5 or 6, but everyone, so I told you, so the drugs and the alcohol were in my family, but I had 6 people in my family who died tragically. 5 were shot to death and 1 was stabbed to death. And there was a period I used to go through life and I was saying, man, is the Davis family cursed? Are we cursed? Is that going to be my fate? Am I going to get killed? So I was ruminating, everyone. When I read Covey's book, Circle of Concern, Jermaine, yeah, be concerned, but what can you influence? So I started making decisions with my circle of influence. And let me tell you, I used to worry so much that I started developing peptic ulcers. Everyone, that's why I am so passionate about this topic, because it's not something that I just researched. Now, I'm a college professor, so I'm a researcher, but I lived it. So I got a relationship between theory and practice, like lived experience. And so what I used to do, everyone, I used to stuff, because I thought, I got to be tough. I got to be strong. But you know what? I was really tearing myself down mentally, emotionally, and physically. And so I had to learn how to give my energies to what I could control. So I'm going to give you an example. So we were talking about stress, right? So here's the thing. The subtitle to this presentation is called Beating Burnout Before It Brutally Beats You, because burnout will beat you. Now, everyone, here's what the research says. People don't just burn out, everyone. Now, people use these terms interchangeably, but let me tell you, burnout is real. Burnout is severe. Burnout is when you are fried. Burnout is when your body can't even react and respond to the commands that you tell. Like you just like, you can't move physically, mentally, emotionally. So why do people burn out? You know why? Because they ignore the stress. Remember your baseline. That's why I spent so much time on the baseline. So, and that's why I kept saying, what is your SRS? What will be your stress response style? Because if you don't have one, now you're on the road to constant stress. So you're going through life and yeah, you're having some successes, but eventually your body's going to say, hey, remember that slide when Jermaine said self-care? It's the process of getting back to your baseline. Please secure your own oxygen mask before assisting others. So burnout is when people are exhausted. You can't even think straight. So everyone, let me share some research with you. And for those of you who are researchers and you want to follow up, there was a phenomenal researcher and a book. Her name is Dr. Christina Maslach, M-A-S-L-A-C-H, Dr. Christina Maslach, M-A-S-L-A-C-H. She wrote a book entitled The Truth About Burnout. So she's a researcher at UC Berkeley. And everyone, here's what she says. When people are burnt out, here are 3 things that manifest. They become cynical. about life and even their jobs. So think about this. People may go into a profession that they're passionate about, they want to help. But if they don't have a healthy and a positive stress response style, they get cynical. Well, you know what cynical is? You're just negative. You're not even hopeful anymore. And just think about this. You're in the people helping business. You know what? I'm in the people helping business too. So as a college professor, as a speaker, say for instance, I was negative. You know what, man, people don't care. I'm burnt out. They don't care about communication. Man, people don't want to change. People are going to get defensive. They don't listen. People don't listen. Why am I even teaching about listening? People don't listen. They're stubborn. They get their egos in the way. You know what? Forget this, man. Forget this stuff, right? We get cynical. Here's the second thing she says. We become ineffective. So we used to get results, again, private life, personal life, professional life. So you used to be effective, meaning you were getting results, and now you don't get the results that you, right? Because the burnout is affecting your ability to be fully engaged. And the last piece, she says, we are exhausted. So here's what I want you to think about. The goal is this. Intervention is better than prevention. Prevention is better than no attention. Intervention is better than prevention. And intervention is better than no attention. Now, here's what I mean. It would be phenomenal if we can prevent things, but we're human beings. Some things we just don't see. So we have to intervene. And so when we talk about stressing less, we have to intervene. Now, there's times we can prevent things. So you've probably heard this phrase before, either you pay now or you pay later. You always pay. You will always pay a price. Either you pay now or you pay later. So let me give you an example. So say, for instance, in a workplace, you have a colleague, a peer, a coworker that you just don't get along with, and you all are bumping heads. Deep down within, you know you should address the issue, which I call courageous conversations. Well, what is a courageous conversation? A courageous conversation is an honest, open, and transparent dialogue. It's a dialogue. What do you mean a dialogue? I don't know about you. I grew up in a household with monologues, right? My mom said, do as I tell you to do. And so I said, when I became a parent, I was going to have dialogues, right? And let me share this with you. You build trust in the dialogue, not the monologue. See, the monologue is a one-way form of communication. You listen to me. A dialogue says, we listen to each other. Or a dialogue says, I am going to listen to all the stakeholders who are involved in the conversation. Why? Because I need to have some type of cooperation and collaboration with them, especially in the workplace. So, courageous conversation says, I'm going to deal with this. And let me share this with you. Sometimes people say, you know what? Now, they might not use the phrase, I'm going to sweep it under the rug. But you know what they do? They sweep it under the rug. Either you pay now or you pay later. Let me tell you this. When you pay later, there's a bigger cost. I'm going to say this 2 more times. When you pay later, the cost is bigger. When you pay later, sometimes it gets insurmountable. And then you're like, why didn't I deal with this earlier? So a courageous conversation. You pay now or you pay later. So I want to encourage you to pay up front. And let me tell you, it doesn't always feel good. I get it. I'm not running around here in la la land like, I'm a communications professor and I love courageous conversation. Sometimes I get the queasiness in my stomach, everyone. I get the heart palpitations too, right? I feel that. And you know what my baseline does? If Jermaine Davis stuff information, here's what my proprioceptive, remember that fancy word, proprioceptive stimuli, the sensations that you experience internally when you don't deal with things. Here's how mine's manifest. I'll abruptly wake up in the middle of the night and I'm looking up at the ceiling and I'm tossing and turning and I can't sleep. And you know what's in my head? Jermaine, you need to deal with that issue. And sometimes I try to play it off. No, forget, I'm not going to deal with it. And then what you resist only persists. It get bigger. Can I tell you, when I deal with it afterwards, and sometimes during, I feel so much better. You know what the research calls that? Emoting. You know what the Greek philosophers would call that? The cathartic process. Like, everyone think about it. It's cathartic, it's healthy. Like, I'm not holding this, I'm creating space to deal with it. And so then that doesn't stress you out. All right, so moving forward, this is one of my favorite things to share with you. Before we get off this call, I gotta share the 3 A's with you. So I want to talk to you about the art of recalculation. So 5 years ago, I am in Connecticut and I am going to go do a presentation at Southern Connecticut State University. And at this time, I would travel with a portable GPS. And when I would get lost, right, my GPS, that portable Garmin GPS I had, here's what it would say, everyone. Recalculating, recalculating. So I made this one turn and it says recalculating, recalculating. Then I made another wrong turn and it says recalculating. Everyone, here's the nerd part of me. I get back to the hotel and remember, I love humor. I love comedy. And so I look up the word recalculate and I come across a definition and here's what it says. Recalculate means to add over or to do again with the purpose of finding error. To add over or to do again with the purpose of finding error. Meaning this, everyone, if you're going to recharge, beat burnout and stress less, practice the art of recalculation. It's okay to course correct. That is a part of life. See, sometimes when people mess up and they fail, they start to define themselves as a failure. In work, I've seen people do this. I have the fortunate opportunity to travel around the country or meet people virtually, and they define themselves according to a failure. Well, I write about this in my first book. There are the 4 failures: fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of success, fear of the unknown. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of success, and fear of the unknown. These 4 failures or these 4 fears are responsible for impacting billions of people's dreams, goals, and aspirations. So here's what I write. Make failure your teacher. See, it's not failure if you learn from it. It's failure if you don't learn from it. Let me say that again. The wisdom comes when I learn from my failures. I become wise. I can make better decisions. So I'm going to share with you one of my favorite quotes by Booker T. Washington. And Booker T. Washington says this: it matters not what the circumstances are that surrounds a person. What matters is, how does that person respond? Now, let me say this, everyone. Yes, we know circumstances matter, but I just want you to understand the integrity of this quote. So Booker T. Washington says, it matters not what the circumstances are. What matters is, how does that person respond? So if you want to stress less, beat burnout, you want to thrive, you want to flourish, question. Here's what Booker T. Washington was getting at. What's going to define you? The circumstances or your response? Now, remember when I had you draw the circle of concern, the big circle? That stuff happened externally. And the smaller circle is a circle of influence. What can I do? So here's what Booker T. Washington is saying. It is your response to the unfortunate circumstances that will determine your level of success, your level of failure. Will you thrive? Will you flourish? So here's what I want to share with you. The next time you find yourself private life, personal life, professional life, in a circumstance that you will feel like it's overwhelming. I have no control. The 3 A's. The first A is to adjust. Now remember this, we're creatures of habit. We get used to being a certain way, and then guess what? Boom! Adversity happens. Life happens. Any Beatles fans on this call? I had a friend when I was in college, my friend John Lauer, loved the Beatles. Now my friend John knew I love quotes. He says, Jermaine, you need to listen to this quote. John Lennon wrote this song called Beautiful Boy. Everyone listen to it. Now, if I could sing, I would sing to you, but I'm gonna stay in my lane. I'm not a good singer, but I'm good at quoting stuff. So here's what John Lennon writes in Beautiful Boy. Life is what happens to you when you're busy making other plans. You know, sometimes we think our life and our career is gonna go this way. Like we're like, yeah, things are looking good. And then you know what life says? No, pivot, twist, turn, we're going this way. And you're like, no. Guess what? Remember, cognitive interpretation, how I interpret that is going to affect my level of stress. Now, again, I never said you could not be human. Being human is part of healing. So you get to be sad. You get to be mad. You get to be angry. You get to be frustrated. Here's the thing. Don't stay in a negative emotional sentiment. You know why? Because our emotional state is tied to our motivation. Let me say that again. Our, not just yours, Jermaine Davis is included, your emotional state is tied to your motivation. Your emotions, think about the word motivation. Motive. Motivation is about reasons. What reasons cause you to take action? Where if I'm in a negative emotional state, I may not take action. So our emotional state matters. So here's what we do. Make an adjustment. You know what an adjustment is? A quick shift, a quick change. So sometimes people experience stuff and then they're looking for the grand thing to do. Sometimes we have to make a quick adjustment. Now, everyone, I grew up in Chicago, went to graduate school in Wisconsin, now live in Minnesota. So I'm not an expert, but I have learned how to drive on snow and ice. Why? I got my driver's license at 16, and I've been driving for 30 years now on snow and ice. So when I hit an ice patch, sometimes I got to make a quick adjustment, right? So think about that, a quick adjustment. Why? To get back, to be effective. Now let me share this with you. When change happens, remember, so you did a phenomenal job at sharing, like a lot of people mentioned, like, you know, feeling a lack of control. So remember, control your controllables. So when things happen, private life, personal life, professional life, what quick changes, shifts, slight alterations can you make? And then sometimes, I gotta be honest, sometimes you try a lot of different things. So think about COVID. Think the end of first quarter of 2020, right? March of 2020, shook up the world, COVID-19. And guess what? Companies, organizations, whether for-profit, nonprofit, government, city, doesn't matter. All industries, they're affected. They're like, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? You know how many leaders I coached through the adjustment process? I said, let's generate 3 to 5 adjustments. And right away, some people's like, no, Jermaine, we need a permanent solution. I said, are you stressed out about the permanent solution? They said, yes. I said, okay, on the road to a permanent solution, what are some adjustments can you make to be effective? And so I will work with leaders, managers, supervisors, frontline employees. And when we did workshops, I would kind of press them like, nope, what are 3 to 5 adjustments, quick shifts in order for you to maintain, to sustain? And then people start generating ideas. And then next you move to adaptation. Adaptation is when you make a modification based on what? the adjustments. So say, for instance, these 3 to 5, say, for instance, your team, your organization, your industry said, you know what, we're still trying to figure out how to deal with things, but we're going to make these 5 adjustments. And then we're going to see which adjustment or adjustments are most promising based on our current reality. Let me say that again. Which adjustments are most promising that show results? So not all adjustments are long-term solutions. I get that. However, let me share this with you. I said this earlier. Prevention is better than intervention. Intervention is better than no attention. So we have to intervene. And so you look at those, and then you look at, as you begin to adapt, adapting is now making some modifications. Based on these adjustments, here's where we got some results. And then as an individual, as a team, as an institution, as an organization, as a company, then they will adopt the most promising practices that take you towards thriving and succeeding. So again, I'm going to pause here. Any questions or comments about the 3 A's? Adjusting, adapting, and adopting. All right.
I'm not seeing specific questions on that yet, but we did get a couple of questions if you could provide the reading list of books that you've been mentioning, so folks can make a note of all of those great titles. And we're also getting asked if you are able to share your PowerPoint, if we'd be able to send that out to participants later.
Yes, as long as you give me my credit, because then guess what? If you use my PowerPoint, you don't give me my credits, then I get stressed out. Then I get burnt out. Right? So, but yes, I was
Fair.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Okay. So I want you to think about this. Avoid the Wonder Woman and the Superman syndrome. And I mentioned that earlier. What is that? So we know that we have these mighty characters that's part of America and Western world cinema. And I remember growing up, I remember I would watch the show Wonder Woman. And I remember when it would come on, they'd be like, Wonder Woman. And you know, Linda Carter, she's running. She has on her bulletproof bracelet. She got her magical lasso, right? And she's doing all these wonderful things. Then you got Superman, right? More powerful than a locomotive, able to leap tall buildings in a single bound. Look up in the sky, it's a bird, it's a plane. No, it's Superman, right? Well, guess what? That started playing out in real life. People were trying to be these individuals that were characters. This is going to be something you already know, but I'm just going to give you an inspirational and a motivational reminder. I want you to think about this phrase here. When are you going to start picking your nose? When are you going to start picking your nose? No, I'm not being gross. I'm not talking about your nostrils, your N-O-S-E. I'm talking about your yeses and your nos. One of the best ways to get back to your baseline, to recharge, refresh, renew, replenish, is learn how to pick your nose. Remember this. When you say yes to certain things, you say no to other things. When you say no to certain things, you say yes to other things. So here's what I want to share with you. Achieve your goals incrementally. Break them up. Remember, people get overwhelmed, stress, anxiety. So everyone, I'm going to use this metaphor here. This is a paper plate. If I was in person, each one of you all would have got a paper plate. And I use the metaphor plate management. And this is a metaphor for understanding what are my values and priorities. What's on my plate that I need to manage in order to be effective? So one of the things I like to say, achieve your goals incrementally. Break them down. Part of the week, part of the month, part of the day. How do you break your goals down incrementally? Why? Because if everything on my plate seems overwhelming and I look at my plate, here's what happens. I have psychological noise. And then for some people, when they have so much noise in their head and they seem overwhelmed, you know what happens? Nothing. You know what nothing produces? Nothing. You know another word for nothing? Procrastination. People start to procrastinate. So when I work with individuals, I'm like, break your goals down incrementally. What are those 3 things I need to get done today? What are those 3 things I need to get done this week? You know where else I learned that from? Again, Stephen Covey. Begin with an end in mind. What are my deliverables? So now you know what happens? Let me share with you a psychological and emotional trick. When you break your goals down incrementally and you start achieving them, you know what happens? It increases your self-esteem, your self-concept, how you see yourself, how you feel about yourself. Now you might say, Jermaine, that's kind of fuzzy. That's that soft stuff. No, my friend, do the research. Do the research on self-esteem, self-concept, and productivity. It is easy for people to procrastinate when they feel helpless and hopeless. Let me say that again. It is easy for people to procrastinate when they feel helpless and hopeless. So how do I increase my hopefulness? What is hope? Hope is the belief that things can get better. So you know what? I'm going to break this down. Everyone, I have written 10 books. I'm working on my 11th and 12th book right now. Let me tell you a process that I use. I break it down incrementally. Okay, Jermaine, how many pages are you going to edit today? How many pages are you going to write today? I didn't say how many prolific pages I'm going to write today. I said how many pages I'm going to write. And I'll say, you know what? I'm going to get up from 6 a.m. and from 10 a.m. and I want to write 5 pages. I start writing. Then I edit. You know what? When I accomplish that, I feel better. And guess what? It gives me hope. Then the next day, how many are you gonna write? Oh, I'm kind of tired today. I'm going to write 3 pages today. Well, you start to do that over the month. Before you know it, I got 60 pages. And so guess what? My esteem goes up. I'm feeling good because I break my goals down incrementally. What of your goals? Personal goals, professional goals, financial goals, health goals, spiritual goals. What are your goals that you need to, right? Everyone. So diabetes is in my family. So you know what I started doing? I remember, what was that, 2014. I said, okay, my mother passed away in 2005. My grandmother passed away in 2014 and complications related to diabetes. So guess what? Boom, JD, aha moment. So you know what? I said, you know what? Here's what I'm going to do. I was having a hard time getting to the gym. So I remember I told my doctor, right? I've never been a super big guy, but so I told my doctor, I said, you know what? I'm going to work out every day for 20 minutes. She said, every day? I said, I can do 20 minutes. This morning, I got up. Okay, I only did 14. So there's certain things that I do. And I went to the doctor, you know what my doctor said? Mr. Davis, you're trimming down. I said, I told you. She said, you do 20 minutes every day. I said, okay, sometimes I do 10. I said, but you know what I noticed? And everyone, there's a book called Many Habits. These are many. So I work on it every day. I'm giving you practical things. And guess what? That helps me get mentally, emotionally centered. And then here's the next piece. This sounds very simple. Ask for help. We don't ask for help because we're weak. We ask for help because we want to stay strong. Asking for help is not a sign of weakness. Asking for help is, hey, I'm having some challenges right now. I want to keep my momentum going. I want to keep my motivation going. I want to keep my enthusiasm going. Now, I think some things are shifting because we talk about mental health more. Women have been socialized. It's okay to ask for help. But men, historically, right? I gotta be strong. I'm the hunter. I'm the provider. I gotta show strength. And I got to tell you the story before I move forward. So my son, he plays football. And so I played basketball growing up. So my son was playing on this traveling football team and he was frustrated. And then because I know him, I saw tears in his eyes. And so he came over and I said, Z, what's wrong? He was like, nothing. And I said, so you all have 2 more games. And so I put my 2 fingers by his chest and I said, listen, you shouldn't hold that in. I said, we don't do that, man. I said, forget this I'm strong, super macho football player. I don't show any weakness. I said, no, we're going to break that cycle, brother. We're breaking that cycle. You can be strong and emote. I said, as a matter of fact, you will play better when you emote. I said, now I'm not saying run around crying. I said, don't hold that in. And he started, so the tears started to come down his eyes, everyone. I said, that's what I'm talking about. I said, what's going on? So he shared his frustration. So no lie. He got back in the game, 2 interceptions. And he looked at me. I did my proud papa moment. I was like, told you, right? Don't hold it in. Emote. We don't ask for help because we're weak. We ask for help because we want to stay strong and get back to our baseline and practice self-care. Why? So we can be effective and efficient in all areas of our life. But if you hold in, guess what? Your body will let you know. So I talked about plate management. So here's what I'm going to share with you. I want you to think about your values. Plate management, again, is a metaphor for managing your values and your priorities. And your values and your priorities are what matters to you. You might be saying, how does this help everyone? Here's how it helps. My mother used to say this. I spoke about this at my mother's memorial service. Carolyn Charmaine Davis, my mother used to say, JD, does your audio match your video? Oh, when I was growing up. Does your audio match your video? When what you say and what you do line up, she says, baby, that creates magic. But if you're saying this and you're doing that, it doesn't create magic. Your audio needs to match your video. And let me tell you the psychological and emotional benefit. So if we were together and I would say, hey, what are your top 5 to 7 core values? In other words, what are those things that matter most to you? And here's the thing. Are you living your values? Because here's what research says. When you have a value and you live it, what happens is you increase your overall satisfaction in life, school, and work. You've probably seen these quotes online. Don't die with your music still in you. People die with their music still in them. So here's a phrase. You can have a life by design or a life by default. You can have a life by chance or a life by choice. You can have a career by design or a career by default. You can have a career by chance or you can have a career by choice. You know what creates that? When you're clear about what's on your plate. See, sometimes people are just going through life and they're working and it feels meaningless. You know why? Because their audio isn't matching their video. When our audio matches our video, guess what? We start to experience levels of satisfaction, overall happiness, and overall health. You feel like your life has meaning. So what are those things on your plate? And be honest. What are those things on your plate that you've been neglecting? Perhaps private life, personal life, or professional life. I was speaking last week and there was a senior level executive and he said, you know what, Jermaine, thank you for sharing this. He said, you're giving me language to have with my family. And he was like, he says, when I think about my plate and I think about my 3 Ps, private life, personal life, professional life, he says, I can be excelling in one of my Ps and failing in another one of my Ps. And I said, but how does it make you feel overall? He says, I still feel like something's missing. I said, you know why? Because that's on your plate and it's being ignored. And so sometimes the things that are on our plate that we're not creating space and time for can lead to moments of unhappiness, sadness, moments of depression. Now, I'm not talking about clinical depression because I'm not qualified to speak on that, but I'm talking about those moments where you start to feel down like, you know what? It got to be more to life than this. Is this it? Well, I want to encourage you to practice plate management. How do you do that, everyone? With your 168. Now, here's a practical activity. Get clear about what's on your plate. And here's what you ask yourself. How much of my 168 am I going to spend on the things that matters to me? I wrote about this in my first book, this simple phrase here. All dreams and goals have a price tag. All dreams and goals have a price tag. Question. How much does your dream cost? How much are your goals costing? I'm not just talking about money. I'm talking about the commitment. So everyone, you've heard me mention my son a lot. So I'm gonna give you perks, right? So I told you things didn't work out between my parents. And when my dad left, he left. So recently, I'm gonna share this with you. I didn't plan on sharing this. I'm gonna share this with you. 3 weeks ago, I was in Fort Lauderdale speaking. So I have a client down there. And my father lives about 90 minutes away. Well, I hadn't seen my father in over a decade. And I had these mixed emotions, everyone. And when I got there, I saw my stepmother, gave her a hug, gave my father a hug. And it was this awkwardness, right? I teach communication, so it was this awkward vibe in the room, right? And you know what my father said? He says, Jermaine, he says, I respect the man and the father you've become. Now, everyone, that meant a lot to me. I said, what do you mean? And he says, you really make time for Zion. I said, you know what? Now, everyone, in my head, I was thinking this, but you know what? My top 5 core values, you know what is on there? It says, I'm just going to say it, be a kick-ass father. That's one of my core values. So let me give you an example. I make my money speaking. During football season, I lose out on money because I want to be at the game. You know why? I only got so much time with Zion. And if I'm running late and he sees me running, sometimes I finish a presentation, I've been coming straight from the airport, I got my suit on, I'm running. His whole demeanor changes. You know what mom says? She'll joke, she said, Jermaine, you would think he's happy that mom's here. And she says, but when he sees you, his energy changes. What am I sharing with you? You want to stress less? You want to recharge? You want to beat burnout? Honor your plate. You know why? Because you start to feel like life matters. The opposite of honoring your plate is dishonoring your plate. So for me, it's important that I have that. Because I wanted a dad to be there when I was shooting my jumpers, learning how to dribble, being at my games. And then you know what my son says? He's like, Dad, get some footage. You know, one of the things we do, we bond over. I'll get footage and we'll laugh. He'll be like, oh, I kind of screwed that up, huh? I'm like, yeah. But we laugh and we talk, but we bond. What's on your plate? Health goals, financial goals, career goals, relationship goals. What's on there? See, it doesn't matter to me. You know what matters to me? It's whatever you have on your plate, that you manage it, utilizing your 168. What do you mean? There's 24 hours in a day and there's 7 days in a week. That's 168 hours. Nothing more, nothing less. Let me share this with you. Between sleep and work, half our 168 is already gone. Just say, they said the National Sleep Foundation a few years ago did a study, and they said the average American sleeps 6 hours and 42 minutes per night. Now, you might sleep less and you might sleep more, but let's just round that up to 7. 7 times 7 is 49. Say, for instance, you work a 40-hour week. That's 89 hours. So half of your 168 is almost gone. So how do you create a life on purpose? Being deliberate, intentional, and purposeful about how I utilize my time, my 168. Let me share this with you. I can do a whole workshop on this now, everyone. When you become aware of what's on your plate and the rest of your 168, let me tell you, it becomes easier for you to say no. The moment I became clear about what's on my plate, how much of my 168 I have left over. So when someone asks something of me, I'm like, you know what, as much as this sounds really tantalizing and engaging, you know what, I'm not going to be able to deliver on this. You know why? Because I'm aware of what's on my plate and my 168. So I encourage you to really think about that. Now, there's a couple of more things, everyone, as I begin to close out here. I want to share with you the RAP philosophy. You want to contribute to a positive team, organizational work environment, practice the RAP philosophy. The RAP philosophy is a tool of engagement. The number one reason why people leave organizations is because of a lack of appreciation. They don't feel valued. So there was a study done by Dr. Bob Nelson. Now, Dr. Bob Nelson is an expert on employee recognition, employee engagement, and employee motivation. So here's what Dr. Bob Nelson says. In this study, he says, 80% of managers believe they do a great job at recognizing their employees. 80% of managers believe they do a great job at recognizing their employees. Everyone, drum roll. Guess what employees said? Okay, let's have a little fun here. What percentage of employees, put in the chat, what percentage of employees, oh, thank you for 8, 15, 5%. Caroline laughed. Okay, so here's what, a couple of years close. Oh, Gina, you got it, 12. So here's what the study said. The study said 12% of employees feel that their managers recognize them in a meaningful way. Everyone, that's a gap. 80% of managers believe they're doing a good job at recognizing. Employees like, no. Only 12% felt like their managers. So everyone, here's the thing. Over the next 30 days, authentically, I want you to have 3 RAP sessions in either or a combination of your private life, your personal life, your professional life. Number 1, the R stands for recognize. You know what recognize says? I see you. Recognition says, I notice. Here's what I love to say. Get caught noticing. Get caught noticing. Notice. Right? So you got to be attentive. You know what my grandmother used to tell me? Oh, I can visualize my grandmother now. West side of Chicago. JD, baby, come here. Ever since I was little, my grandmother would say, JD, you got to be mindful, baby. You got to be mindful. She would always say that you got to be mindful. So pay attention. Get caught noticing. Private life, personal life, family members, platonic friends, professional life. Hey, I noticed how you dealt with that. I noticed how you dealt with that client. I noticed how you dealt with that irate employee. You were very diplomatic. I like the way you handled that situation. Now, here's the thing. You can recognize and not acknowledge. And that's what I was giving you an example of. Recognition says, I notice, I see, I'm aware, I'm conscientious. You know what acknowledgement means? Is when you give them their roses. Acknowledgement means to admit that things are real. When you acknowledge something, you know what you're saying? It happened. And I saw it. I noticed it. I heard you. And here, I want to give you your roses. I want to lift you up. I want to enlarge you. I want to encourage you. Thank you. Thank you. This is where people start to feel value. Wow, my colleagues notice, my boss, my supervisor notice, my manager, my leader, the administration, they notice. And then they said something. And then they praised, they celebrated. Now, here's the key to praising. Praise people in the way that they find value. For example, I had a client, he loved wine. Him and his wife were wine connoisseurs. They would travel all to the West Coast and wine. So during Christmas, one of the things he would do was bring back these really eclectic bottles of wine to everyone. I'm coaching one of his direct reports, and he says, Jermaine, you know, when you talked about the rap philosophy? He said, yeah, he says, I don't think my boss gets me. And I said, why? He says, I'm in recovery. And he says, you know how many bottles of wine I have? And he says, I don't have the courage to tell him because I don't want to hurt his feelings. Everyone. Boom. Ding, 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 ding. Aha moment.
I actually have a question coming in, if I can interrupt you for just a second. How many goals do you recommend pursuing at one time, or having on your plate at once?
So on your plate are your core values. And so goals, the research is like no more than 2 to 3 goals. And then even if you have 3 goals, they shouldn't be ginormous goals. Because remember, with your 168, I don't care if you Black, white, Asian, Latinx, you know, heterosexual, gay, we all get 168 hours a week. Nothing more, nothing less. So we can only produce so much with your 168. Because remember, between sleep and work, half of your 168 is already gone. So you really got to be deliberate, intentional, purposeful. So I wouldn't say have 3 ginormous goals, right? So you have 3 goals, but then look at those goals and say, okay, which one is my bigger goal? Okay, Jermaine said, break it down incrementally. Right? And so here's the thing, as you accomplish your goals, guess what? Then you can make room for new goals. So no more than 2 to 3 goals, and make sure they're not all ginormous goals. Anything else? Is that it?
No other questions that I'm seeing. A couple of good comments in the chat.
All right, so I'm going to finish up with this, everyone. I have to talk about this. I cannot get off this call without sharing this with you. You want to recharge, you want to refresh, you want to renew, you want to replenish, you want to stress less, beat burnout. I want to ask you a question. Are you matching or are you mismatching? And I'm not talking about your clothes, my friends. Are you matching or are you mismatching? In this photo here was my first career professional job. I tell people I was a chip and dip hustler throughout Minnesota and Wisconsin. I worked for Frito-Lay, right? I was a district sales and marketing manager. The person who hired me here was my boss, Wendy. So I'm working for Frito-Lay, and everyone, I got to be honest, I'm making great money. And my mother used to say this, the boy from the hood is doing good. I was making money. I'm sending money back home to help out family. Like I'm breaking the cycle of poverty. I'm feeling good. However, drum roll, I was not matching everyone. And because I wasn't matching, you know what it did? It added stress. Remember, stress, internal, external factors that you perceive as threatening to your healthy well-being, your baseline, your happiness. So here's what happens, everyone. Tags. Everyone on this Zoom call, we all have tags. Talents, abilities, gifts, and skills. Talents, abilities, gifts, and skills. You know what your tags are? Your tags are your unique set of assets everyone on this call, we all have a unique set of assets that we bring to the workplace. Now, when I say matching and mismatching, what I'm really getting at is, are your tags being leveraged and utilized? Sometimes people are in positions, but their tags aren't being leveraged. And you know what this is called? So we talked about stressing out and we talked about burning out. You know what this is called? Rusting out. When your tags, your talents, abilities, gifts, and skills are underutilized, not maximized, not engaged, not valued, we feel like we're rusting out. You know what rusting out means? You're bored. You're disengaged. You're going through the motions. So one of the ways to beat burnout and stress less and to recharge yourself is when you use your talents, abilities, gifts, and skills. So I'm going to close out with this question here. And if you can put in the chat, which of your tags, when utilized, energizes you the most? Think about, what are your talents? What are your abilities? What are your gifts? What are your skills? Maybe in a workplace, you're using your tags. So guess what? You feel alive, you feel whole, you feel like you're really making a contribution. And then maybe there are aspects of your tags that you're not using. And so then maybe in a one-on-one with your supervisor, manager, your boss, your leader, you might say, hey, you know what? I'm really good at this. Is there space in our organization for me to utilize one of my strengths? You know, this Jermaine Davis guy said we all have tags, talents, abilities, gifts, and skills. He says we all have a unique set of assets that we bring. So sometimes it's having that courageous conversation, even with your leaders. So let me see here. Oh, being creative, strong interpersonal skills, teaching, helping people. So everyone, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen. And with the time that we have left, I'm gonna see if individuals have any questions, comments, rebukes, rebuttals. Was this helpful? Was this a good use of your time? Or do you feel like you should have been at home eating Haagen-Dazs and Cheetos or something? Innovation, thank you. Mentoring people, helping out.
Davis, we have a question in the chat box here that says, what were the 4 fears you mentioned?
Yes, fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of success, and fear of the unknown. So failure, rejection, success, and unknown. Someone said, what happened with the wine guy? So I had to coach him. And because they had a small team, I was trying to keep it anonymous. And I said, hey, listen, and everyone, this is a really good example of leading with an inclusive lens. And I said, you can have a good intent and a negative impact. So you're coming from a good place. However, the impact is you have a person in recovery and your great gift is not registering to them as a great gift. But if you want to be effective, then you need to find out what is a great gift from their perspective. Other questions? Thank you, everyone.
I know earlier a few folks asked about the reading list. I know one of the titles you mentioned, I think, was The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, if I'm getting that right. But if
Yes.
you have those titles at the top of your mind, I'm sure people would like to write those down.
Okay, so I mentioned Dr. Stephen Covey, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And then I mentioned Daniel Goldman, Goleman, Emotional Intelligence. And then I mentioned Iyanla, and that's Iylana, and her last name is Van Zant, Vanzat. And so I quoted from various of her books. She has a book called In the Meantime, and she has a book called Acts of Faith. But when you Google her, you'll see multiple. And then I mentioned my stuff, but you know what? I'm not going to give you the titles of mine. If you can just put it in Google and put in Jermaine Davis. And if you're interested, then you can go to my website. But I want to say thank you to Paula for being tenacious of working with me. So thank you. And I'm not sure if Jackie's on this call, but if she is, if not, let Jackie know. I met her at APPA in 2015, and she has been not a client, but a friend. When I travel to different parts of the world, her husband and I will go out and eat and we catch up. So that's the beauty of building relationships. So thank you for allowing me to share. I hope this was helpful for you. And please feel free to reach out. You can email me, and I am on LinkedIn. I do videos every week. So if you need some inspiration, check me out, Dr. Jermaine Davis on LinkedIn. So I'll turn it back over to you.
And thank you, Dr. Davis. Kate, are you with us?
I am.
Go for it.
Okay. Many thanks to our friends at Attente and EverHealth for their sponsorship, Carrie and Jackie. Thank you for being such an important part of any CCD events over the years. Attente, a worldwide leader in electronic monitoring, offers 1- and 2-piece GPS, RF, alcohol, and mobile app monitoring products and services. Their mission is to create a positive social impact by providing innovative solutions of superior quality and value for law enforcement and corrections agencies. Since 1994, Attente has been assisting government agencies and correctional service providers worldwide, sharing their unparalleled expertise, experience, and technical knowledge to bring peace of mind to communities and the people whose job it is to keep them safe and secure. Since 1995, EverHealth is specialized in providing substance use monitoring services tailored to the unique needs of courts and social service agencies that operate at the holistic intersection of health care and criminal justice. Our predictive client-centered individualized monitoring and care management tools combine the power of technology, people, and science. EverHealth has seamlessly integrated every element of our customers' monitoring needs, including collections, laboratory services, and predictive analytics reporting for improving clients' compliance and outcomes. At EverHealth, our mission is to reclaim lives, unite families, and strengthen communities by creating and providing the smartest, most innovative solutions for substance use disorder monitoring and recovery. We would also like to thank the amazing folks at NECCD who worked to make this training happen. Please take a moment to complete the brief survey that will be emailed out along with your certificates and let us know how we're doing. I would like to encourage you to check out our website, neccd.net, and sign up to become a member of the New England Council on Crime and Delinquency. Our members get access to our amazing trainings, conferences, and networking opportunities, as well as scholarship opportunities and discounted tuition at Southern New Hampshire University. You can also follow us on Facebook. We are going to take a brief 15-minute break, and then we will convene again to have our annual awards ceremony. You are welcome to stay and watch, or feel free to log off. Our next webinar will be December 8th with Tobin Fisher, titled Ignition Interlock Industry Overview in the Northeast, Interlock Products and Solutions. We hope you have a great rest of your day.